my microphone. Actually. Hello, friends, and our Hormones Balance community. I'm here today with Dr. Isabella Wentz. You probably recognize her, and I'm not sure if I should be doing like the full-on introduction, but for those of you who maybe might be new to the journey and you're just like, something is quite not right with my hormones, but you're new to all of this, Dr. Isabella Wentz is, I don't even have like your former bio, but she's very well known as a thyroid pharmacist. Her number of her books became New York Times bestsellers. She's been helping millions of women, I should say people, but predominantly it's the women who take care of themselves a lot better than men do and suffer from thyroid conditions. But her new book has just come out and it's all about the adrenals. So it's not the thyroid anymore. But it's about the adrenals. And so let's do this, you guys. I'm going to welcome her and we're going to jump in just a second. So start posting your questions and we will allocate. How much time do we have, Isabella, for this? What's your availability like today? Oh, no, you're muted. Yeah. Okay, she will figure out her.
There we are. Is this better?
Okay. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
I have 3 hours or so. Is everybody available for 3 hours?
I told you she's funny. When we sent out the email this morning, we said she's not only smart, but she's got quality of a comic. So that's clearly the case. No, so all right. So we have some really good a good hour or so, hopefully, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Let's shoot for that. And so post your questions in the comments. What would you like to know? And then we will do like a little bit of Q&A. I have a lot of questions for her. And then we will take some questions from you guys and have some fun that way. And by the way, who here has done any of the recommendations from Dr. Isabella's previous books? Let us know about that. Would love to know. We did not connect on time. We didn't have enough time to connect prior to this call, but can we do like a book giveaway?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I just actually got mine. So if you, and I'm getting a box of them later today, so I can actually give a signed book.
Oh,
one of people in Magdalena's community. So I would love that.
Awesome. So let's do this. As we're going through the Q&As, we'll make a decision based on like a really good question for Dr. Isabella, or like a really great comment about something that you have done to help yourself when it comes to thyroid, Hashimoto, something that from her previous books. So we're testing you guys here a little bit. Okay, so let's just maybe start off with, you are known so well as the thyroid queen, as the Hashimoto's ninja, right? You've reversed your Hashimoto's. That's actually how you and I met, was through Hashimoto's. And I had a podcast back then that like lasted for 20 episodes and I got sick and tired of it. And you reached out. And so we became fast friends. And then, so you've been always doing thyroid. And then suddenly the adrenals book came out, right? So can you let's talk a little bit about like what made you write the adrenals book? And I would also love for you to address maybe right out of the gates, what are the symptoms of like, when should you be concerned if it's my adrenals? Because my doctor told me there's no such thing as an adrenal dysfunction. And so what are the things that we should be looking out for? So I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but I'm sure you are so capable, you will know what to do with that. So
okay. That's quite the challenge. And yes, I love, you and I have known each other for some time, and I feel like we're always on the same page and we're always growing and changing and learning. Personally, for me, I have always been talking about adrenals in the context of thyroid health. I had adrenal dysfunction as part of my part of what I needed to heal on my healing journey with Hashimoto's. So I was diagnosed in my 20s. And then started on medications and still had a lot of symptoms. So then I was like, what more can I do? So I ended up taking gluten and dairy out of my diet. That resolved my acid reflux, that resolved my irritable bowel syndrome, and then carpal tunnel soon went away after that. but I still had brain fog. I still had fatigue, especially in the mornings. I was super anxious, irritable, stuck in that like really fight or flight, adrenaline, sympathetic kind of dominant state where I was just edgy and high strung and just very much kind of intense, right?
Mm.
And wasn't getting refreshing sleep. And so part of what was going on with me was that adrenal dysfunction. And I would go like, I first came across the term and I was like, oh, adrenal fatigue, adrenal dysfunction. And I Googled it. And of course, like Dr. Google's like, this doesn't exist. This is like a quack diagnosis. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm a pharmacist. I'm not going to fall for this, like, whatever. Right. And then finally it took like the 15th person to say to me like, hey, I think you really need to look into adrenal fatigue. And so I did. And sure enough, I had every symptom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I have every symptom and let me try the recommendations that people are recommending for it and see if that helps. And sure enough, holy cow, it helped. I went from like the brain fog went away, the fatigue went away. Like my brain was working again. I felt like calm and, my sense of humor came back and was able to get refreshing sleep. I didn't need to sleep for 11 hours a night. I used to get like really anxious when my husband would go jogging. I would be like, you've been gone for 20 minutes. Why aren't you home yet? Like, did you get hit by a car? Did you run off with another woman? Right. So he had to like make accommodations for my anxiety. Like he had to prepare like pretty much, he was going to Las Vegas for a bachelor party and he like had to prepare like a PowerPoint presentation to me, like to justify him going. How anxious I was. And he's like, here's the number, here's what we're going to do. And I was like, have fun. He's like, that's it. He's like, you're not like freaking out about this. I'm like, I'm good. Yeah. And it was amazing. Like once my adrenals were balanced, I was like, oh, I'm actually like not this like emotional person that is so moody. I'm like very calm, collected, and laid back and relaxed. And it was just life-changing. And so I've gone through this kind of personal journey with adrenal dysfunction. I found that 90% of people with thyroid issues have it, but also people who don't have thyroid issues might have adrenal dysfunction. And so I'm not going to change my name to the adrenal pharmacist just yet, I don't think, but but this is such a big deal for most people with thyroid issues, most people with chronic health issues, and women going through perimenopause and menopause. And part of why I'm talking about it now in a separate book is because the protocols that I was initially trained in, they can be effective, but they do rely on utilizing hormones and testing, which you do have to do with like a functional practitioner. And I don't necessarily I'm like in the business of empowering people and letting them take charge of their own health. So I would be like, go find a doctor that'll test your adrenals. And people would go to their endocrinologist. The endocrinologist would be like, oh, well, you don't have Addison's. Yeah. And then they'd find the right doctor and the doctor would be like, okay, you have to pay cash for my services and cash for this test. So finally they'd get the test. And then they like get the test home and they're like, how the hell do I do this test? So, you do the test and then finally you send it in and then like the lab has a backlog and it's like 4 to 8 weeks to get the results. So it's like, 6 months pass and you're still struggling with the same symptoms, where I really found another way, a protocol that doesn't focus on using hormones to get people out of that survival, getting them into a thriving state in just 3 to 4 weeks. And I think just for anybody listening, if you haven't heard of adrenal fatigue, what the symptoms might be, let's kind of go through. Typical person will say they might wake up super tired. They wake up, they don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They don't know why they woke up. They might struggle with morning fatigue, with brain fog. They might be relying on caffeine and coffee to get them through the day. I don't know if anybody, I'm people, so I have been there. I don't know if anybody here is people as well. They might have a 3 p.m. crash. They might have just anxiety, palpitations. They might have trouble falling asleep. They might have wakings throughout the night. Their sleep might feel super unrefreshed. And like they're anxious, they're edgy. they're very irritable and they're like wired but tired. They need wine at night to wind down. And it's, I will say it's not a disease, right? So it's not like a disorder. This is just where the body goes when it's overwhelmed by stress. And
Yeah.
this is a very predictable response of what happens when we're stressed out. The symptoms are very predictable, they're very real. And there's also a very predictable way to get out of that response.
So, one of the things that I've noticed about hormonal imbalances is that it's very seldom we just have one, right? It's like, it's most of the time, it's a cluster of things. And so the common ones I see is, thyroid Hashimoto's, and like same as you, adrenal dysfunction and estrogen dominance. That was my story, right? You often see menopause and thyroid, right? We often see PCOS, and so high testosterone levels, testosterone converts to estrogen, not surprising, estrogen dominance with adrenals thrown in, right? And so there's just so, can you maybe talk a little bit about, when I used to do health histories back in the day when I was still in private practice, we will do this memory thing of like from birth till today, right? And on one side of the page, you just write like, what are some of the major events that happen in your life, like death of a parent, of a partner, losing a business, or being fired from a job, right? Taking care of parents, whatever, accidents, and etc. And then on the other side of the page, you write when the major diseases struck, and it was really eye-opening, even for me as a practitioner, to see how major events could cause serious illness like soon after. For some people it's 3 months, some people it's 6 months later, right? It's like, oh, then that's when I was suddenly diagnosed with Hashimoto's, right? But 6 months prior, my mother was in hospice and I was taking care of her, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I would love for you to maybe talk about like, what are some of the triggers that you see in people that can cause for us to go on that path, and how does it connect to other hormones? Meaning that, what I think we're seeing a lot of the time is stress can really bring out a lot of other hormonal imbalances. And so kind of the adrenals can just pull everything down with them. And hence repairing them, right, can be a very promising and hopeful solution for a lot of people. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. And just like you, Magdalena, most of the people that I've worked with and talked to, they will say that I'll ask them the question, what was going on in your life before you got sick? And the majority of them will say it was a very stressful event in their life, right? So maybe they were, like you said, going through a divorce or a death in the family or something super, super challenging, but also some positive things. So getting a job promotion, moving to a new city, having a new baby, things that we typically think of like positive things, these can be stressors as well. And then we have people who have gone through, they maybe don't have a major stressor that occurs, but they have this cup, right? We all have like a cup of things that can impact us. And for whatever reason, that cup overflows. So people have start off with a smaller cup because they have a history of childhood trauma or adverse childhood events, where this puts them at risk of getting overwhelmed in their day-to-day life just from having that history. So their current life might actually be just fine. Maybe there's nothing like stressful in their recent past, but there's something stressful that's kind of causing them to shift into that survival mode that a long time ago. Then there's physiological stressors. So typically we think of like people who are sleep deprived, people who are exercising too much, people who are burning the bridge at both ends, typically, like new business owners or people trying to have like side hustles, right? So I know we have friends like that too, that have gone through that situation where, whatever you're pushing your body to the physical limits and you've pushed it over the edge where the body can no longer compensate. And, motherhood, it can be like that too. And then we also have situations that maybe people just are not aware of, where they're part of modern day life. So if we're a little bit overweight, the traditional advice is to exercise more and eat less, right? So sometimes that can be enough of a stressor on their body, especially if there's other things going on that can put us over the edge. And then there are like hidden dangers. So you might have an H. pylori infection. that is causing a lot of inflammation and stress in your body, you might not be aware of it at all, right? Unless you do some testing or unless you recognize the symptoms. You might have something like a toxic mold exposure, where I've worked with people over the years that are like, well, my life is great. I can't complain about my life. But it's because they're stuck in that overwhelmed fight or flight state. It could be because of mold exposure or another kind of toxic exposure. So this is kind of what happens when the body's under stress. It shifts into this survival mode. When we're in survival mode, the body's not going to be thinking about reproduction, right?
Yeah.
So the body's like, okay, why do we need progesterone? This doesn't help us survive. And there's something known as a pregnenolone steal, where the body, to fuel that stress response, we have something called pregnenolone that's created from cholesterol that then makes a whole bunch of our other hormones, including progesterone and cortisol. And so when body's been stressed for a while, it's preferring that cortisol production, and it'll basically make more cortisol rather than making progesterone. And then we have a lot of that stress too. This can impact the thyroid gland. When we have a lot of cortisol circulating in our body and a lot of perceived stress, the body will create more of something known as reverse T3 that will then block thyroid hormone receptors in the body. Rather than activating them, it'll just kind of block them. So active thyroid hormone can't get in there. And people will say like, well, I don't have a thyroid condition, but I have all these thyroid symptoms. And it's because of that stress that is causing those symptoms. Or they're like, why do I have hormonal issues? Like, what's going on here? And again, it's that stress that's causing the hormonal issues.
Yeah, totally. That's why stressed out women can't get pregnant, right? You know, it's like the classic thing of we tried everything and for 10 years couldn't get pregnant, and then they go and adopt a child. They fall in love with the child. They chill the hell out finally, right? Stop doing all the tests, the trying and stuff, and fall in love with the child. There's love and, you know, and calmness and finally sleep in the family. And then they get pregnant with their own child. Right? You know, it's like, I mean, there's obviously a lot of reasons why somebody can have infertility, but that's if stress is one of the, and low progesterone is one of them, then that could be helpful. So let's take a couple of questions. I'm going to display them here. Tammy's saying, so, you know, our audience are very like, like, I want the help. Like, what do I do now? So very actionable. So let's dive into that. Tammy is asking, what are the best supplements to take for adrenal fatigue?
So generally for most people, if they are struggling with adrenal fatigue, I might recommend a combination supplement that has the ABCs, and that's adrenal adaptogens, B vitamins, and vitamin C to support the body. Adaptogens help us tolerate stress much better, right? So we end up, like everybody around us becomes less annoying when we take adaptogens, because the stress is still there. We just don't perceive it to be like, it just doesn't get under our skin as much. Then B vitamins and vitamin C are two of the nutrients that are going to be commonly depleted during a stress response. So that is, I actually have a comprehensive plan rather than just taking one supplement. But if you're going to start anywhere, that's a really great place to start. And you also need to address like the sources of stress too. So we can't just take a supplement and hope that all the stress will, go away. It's kind of like, we want to increase our resilience, but we also want to focus on the sources of the stress.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, I find personally that adrenal recovery is so multifactorial and is even more difficult sometimes than like estrogen dominance. With estrogen dominance, I feel it's like do a couple of fixes on your diet, put in a couple of supplements, and most of the time you can reverse it pretty quickly and see some results within a month or two. With adrenal stuff, it takes a while to get there and it takes a while to get out of it. What are some of the lifestyle things that you see that really work well for people, when getting on the journey and making a commitment to really support the adrenals?
Sure. And so in the past, I used to work with protocols that focused on hormones that would take anywhere from 3 months to 2 years to get out of that adrenal fatigue state. And that worked really well for me until I had my first child. And he was beautiful and perfect and sweet and also did not sleep. So at nighttime, one of the fastest ways to get into adrenal fatigue is like not sleeping. So
Mhm.
I have a test of my adrenals when he was about 8 months old, and my adrenals were just flatlined. I was barely producing any cortisol. And I was like, well, I can't really take any hormones right now because I was nursing my son. And, various reasons women can't take DHEA. Some of them overconvert it to estrogen. Some of them might get chin hair from using it. Not always accessible, and you always need to work with a practitioner. So I was like, well, what can I do to shift myself out of that fight or flight state to get more into like a thriving state? And I came across just some unique approaches where I really thought about like, what am I doing in my life that's sending these danger signals to my body? And I have about 14 different safety signals that I focus on, and not everybody will need to do all of them, but thinking about, okay, what could be a danger signal if you are not eating enough food, if you are somebody that's skipping meals, and if you're eating food that's inflammatory to you? What is that telling your body, right? If you were a cave woman would only starve herself, right? If there was a famine. And so that tells your body that you need to like conserve energy and slow down your metabolism. And that's kind of what adrenal fatigue does and thyroid issues do. And so what I encourage women oftentimes to do is to eat more protein and fat every
Mhm.
2 to 3 hours in the beginning, to get themselves back on track and to shift their body from that breaking itself down for fuel to we have enough fuel to fix ourselves. And we focus on anti-inflammatory foods and just super nourishing the body to send it that safety signal of, hey, we are safe, food is plentiful, we do not have to go into survival mode because we're starving. And a lot of it focuses on, blood sugar balance, protein, fat, as well as some key nutrients that are very commonly depleted in when somebody's been under stress for a long time.
Yeah, there is. I'm just gonna show one comment here, so it's gonna block our faces. So Lucinda is saying, "Hi, ladies. I got off thyroxine after 7 years of hypothyroid by quitting my job as a touring musician to hang out on the beach with my friends' young kids, which I believe balanced my hormones through maternal instinct. Do you think that it could have been that the sunshine and connecting with nature too? The doctor was angry and scolded me. You have God on your side this time." Because they said for years that my thyroid definitely would not work without medication. Now I see also that was by letting, and I guess it's just letting it all happen and unfold. Yeah, I mean, this is, obviously this is not everyone can quit their job and go and live on the beach.
You should.
But it's like even like even for me, like if I have a stressful day with work and I'm feeling frustrated, just going out in nature. And most of you know that I live in Colorado, up in the mountains, surrounded by beautiful trails. And that's one of the most sacred things for me, is to just go and be in nature. I mean, you don't have to quit your job and go to the beach, but just being out in nature and, going and hugging a tree and being really surrounded by that kind of energy has got incredible healing effect as well. So talk to us about your new book. And hey, you guys, I just posted the new book link to Amazon in the comments, or you can just go on Amazon and look for the adrenal transformation protocol, correct?
Mm-hmm. Adrenal transformation protocol.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about the book. Like, how is the book structured? What are you teaching that's new in the book? And all the good stuff.
Definitely. So this is the book, and it has a 4-week protocol. The first section has an introduction about understanding your adrenals and how doing some self-assessments to see where you might be on your healing journey, what might be some stress signals that your body is receiving. The second section has a 4-week plan that focuses on how to really reset your stress response. And so I talked about replenishing. That's one of the very first core steps, where we focus on getting some of these nutrients on board, such as the B vitamins, vitamin C, magnesium, electrolytes. These are some of the things that get really burned up when we're under a lot of stress. Replenishing them kind of neutralizes the situation and helps with a lot of the stress symptoms. So like magnesium can help us sleep better at night, can help us get rid of cramps, anxiety. Vitamin C can help us with some of the immunity issues that people may have. Then I really focus on re-energizing the person. So giving them a really great connection with the circadian rhythm and supporting their mitochondria. When we are under a lot of stress, we end up essentially, this can be very damaging for our mitochondria. And then we usually end up somewhat disconnected from the circadian rhythm if this goes on long enough. So people are like, I'm a night owl, I can't wake up in the morning. And so we do a lot, or they wake up throughout the night. So we do a lot of just getting connected with that circadian rhythm. And to the point about the lady going to the beach, yes, going outside first thing in the morning, stepping out in nature is going to be incredibly healing for your body. Sunshine is actually one of the things that activates our helps to convert the cholesterol into our bodies into pregnenolone, our mother hormone that creates all of these other beautiful hormones within our body. When people have low levels of cortisol in the body, we hear cortisol's bad, but that's not necessarily the truth. A lot of people with hormonal issues and fatigue and thyroid issues, they end up having not enough cortisol in the body. And that actually causes a lot of inflammation because cortisol is an anti-inflammatory hormone. And so, the woman that was spending all this time at the beach, she was probably regulating her circadian cortisol production so that she had lots of healthy levels of cortisol throughout the day to manage her inflammation throughout the day, and really good levels of melatonin at night to help repair her mitochondria, right? So part of that mitochondrial support, I do focus on connecting with the circadian rhythm naturally. That's going to be really healing for our mitochondria. Also, like things that we use for adrenal support, B vitamins, vitamin C are great for mitochondria. Rhodiola can help repair mitochondria. Carnitine as well as D-ribose are two additional supplements that I might recommend with mitochondrial benefits. And when people really support their mitochondria, they find that they have more energy. The brain fog goes away. About 92% of the people with mitochondrial support will say, my brain fog, that has improved within just the 3 to 4 weeks, no matter how long they've had it. And so I focus on going through the process. We go through replenish, re-energize. We focus on revitalizing, which is where we really focus on really pleasurable activities and oxytocin to flood ourselves with some of these stress reducing hormones.
What are some of your favorite oxytocin generating, activating things?
Hanging out with you. So, chatting with girlfriends is a really, really great one. That's one of my favorites. Going on walks in nature. This is fabulous for me. Taking hot baths is really great for me. That just makes me always feel like warm and fuzzy inside. Lavender essential oil, that can actually help with releasing oxytocin. And then, snuggling with loved ones, whether that's my husband, my son, and Magdalena has 2 lovely doggies. I used to have a lovely doggie. I don't think I've talked about this publicly, but unfortunately we lost him recently. So, but pets are a great way to get oxytocin release into your body. And if you don't have any of these things, you can even consider things like a weighted blanket or a stuffed animal.
For me, it's getting a massage as well. Like everything else on top of what you said, I literally feel it's not an orgasm, but it's something, as close as just a human touch. And I just absolutely love that, just the touch. And some people don't like to be touched. So if you don't like to be touched, massage is not for you. Totally. But if you do, then, this is, and one way of thinking about this is we all have stress. It's a little bit, think of it as this, I'm drinking this water right now, right? So the stress is like you just keep pouring water in. But if you have like a little faucet down below here and you open it up and you let the water out, that's your oxytocin, like your stress relieving thing, then you're kind of creating some kind of a balance in your life, in your hormonal health. So think of it this way. It's like we are never going to get rid of all the stressors, right? There's always stuff is always going to happen and be thrown at our lives. As long as it's not self-created, it's like you're going to analyze that. If it's self-created, got some work on you, girlfriend. But if it's, if it's just life, right? It's out of your control, then just bringing in these things into your life. One of the big things that I used to do was like whenever I have a much better team now, but whenever we had like big lunches, and I'll just get completely burned out, but then I'll make it a point to go and get a massage, and be outside, right? And that I felt like, okay, this could be a nice balancing act. So we are getting a lot of questions here about testing. And so, and also, let me not forget, because the whole premise of this talk was connection between adrenals and menopause too. So we'll get this in just a second, but let's talk about testing first. Like, what kind of testing do you recommend? Where do you stand on blood testing, which is what allopathic doctors will do, if at all? Yeah.
So definitely testing is great. If you can have a practitioner to order the tests for you, you can also self-order them. They're usually going to be out of pocket, and you do want to work with somebody that knows how to like interpret them. And I love adrenal saliva testing by ZRT Lab or the Dutch urine test. This can be incredibly helpful. Again, I'm somebody that wants to empower everybody to take charge of their own health. And for 10 years, I've recommended testing, and I've had people time after time tell me I can't find the right doctor. This is so expensive. And, I kind of got the test, but it's been sitting on my shelf for so long. And so if you can do testing, absolutely do it. It can be incredibly helpful. See things on paper, see the before and after, and really understand and validate your symptoms. But if not, like, you can just take an inventory of your symptoms, and then you can go by your symptoms, because my program focuses on helping you feel better based on symptoms. So I wasn't tracking like people's exact cortisol score or exactly how their adrenal saliva was doing as we were going through the program. I was saying, like, how do you feel? Are you still tired in the morning? And they were saying, no, I'm not. I have energy now. What about your brain fog? Are you still brain fogged like you were at the beginning of the program? I was like, no. And so the program is entirely based on symptoms and how to adjust your plan based on your symptoms. Everybody gets a 4-week plan, and then they have a section about once you go through the 4-week plan, which 80% of people feel better after doing this, sometimes up to 92%, depending on the cohort of the program we've had. But then you can still go through and figure out, like, what else do we need to tweak? And there's a section in the book that talks going into the various protocols and things to consider. The allopathic route. So if you go to a conventional doctor, you're like, I think I have adrenal issues. And I've had this conversation so many times with so many women. They're like, well, my doctor tested me for Addison's and said I don't have it. And it's like, okay, well, that's helpful to know. Addison's is a real and very condition. My dog Boomer actually had it. And it is life-threatening. And it's good to know that you don't have it, but it's not the same as adrenal fatigue. And adrenal dysfunction. So most conventional doctors will not test for adrenal dysfunction, which is how the body gets stuck in that stress response.
Some functional docs, in our community, still do adrenal cortisol test first thing in the morning by using blood. Would you say that, like, would you use that in your practice or not really?
I think it could be helpful. But what I'm really trying to see is how connected somebody is to their circadian rhythm. And so that cortisol first thing in the morning, maybe if a person has low cortisol in the morning, that'll tell me something. But like, I'm really looking at like what the pattern is throughout the day. If I'm trying to address it with like hormones, that would be like from my past work as a practitioner, I would utilize pregnenolone, DHEA, sometimes recommend hydrocortisone or glandulars, try to modify that cortisol curve to match that one of a person who has who's aligned with the circadian rhythm, where we have a little bit more cortisol in the morning that gradually declines throughout the day. and that's low in the evenings. But again, my program doesn't focus on like using hormones. We just focus on using targeted safety signals to reestablish that healthy cortisol curve. So I don't even need to look at labs at this point. Of course, if somebody was struggling after the program, which most people go through it and they have fantastic results, then we could always do some more testing and tweaking and figuring out like, okay, what's going on? Are you over converting into this type of hormone? And do we need to address any kind of other levels? And I mean, but usually I would also test for nutrients to kind of figure it out. It's basically like, I know most people are going to have adrenal issues based on their symptoms. I've been doing it long enough.
Yeah.
And then have very straightforward ways to get out of that stress response.
So let's take this question because I think it's a good one. Diana is saying, don't we need to know if we are high or low cortisol and at what times? So if we are totally flatline and then we use things to lower it, wouldn't it even lower the cortisol too much?
Absolutely. And I've worked with people who are taking something like phosphatidylserine to lower their cortisol because that's what they thought they had high cortisol. And I actually did their cortisol tests. And I was like, you have low cortisol. You're making yourself, like you're sabotaging yourself by lowering it further. Now, my program doesn't utilize things that specifically raise it, or like 95% of the program is just focused on normalizing things, whether you have overactive too much cortisol or not enough cortisol. But one of the key things to consider is your blood pressure. Like if you have low cortisol, you're probably going to have low blood pressure. If you have high cortisol, you're probably going to have high blood pressure. So I go through, and you can also tell by your feelings. If you're like chronically fatigued all day, probably you have low cortisol. I would say 90% of the people I've worked with Hashimoto's actually fall into the either flipped cortisol curve or low cortisol all day long. And a small percentage of them have excessive cortisol. And you would know, like if you had excessive cortisol, typically you're going to have trouble sleeping. You're more wired. Everybody around you is annoying. So I go through that. There are a few considerations, mostly utilizing licorice. Licorice you don't want to use if you have high blood pressure. It could raise your blood pressure more, could also raise your cortisol. But if you have low blood pressure and if you have low cortisol, licorice can help stretch out your cortisol levels throughout the day. And then exercise, right? So aerobic exercise can be helpful for lowering cortisol. If you are flatlined, don't do aerobic exercise. And typically people will say they feel worse after doing it. So it's something that I want people to like teach them how to connect with their bodies rather than understand the subtle messages the body sends, rather than having to rely on a doctor to do a test for you.
Yeah. And you can, and totally by going by symptoms, you will know exactly what's happening in your body. Talk to us about the connection between adrenal dysfunction and menopause and perimenopause.
Sure. So, one of the really critical times when women might get into that adrenal dysfunction is in perimenopause, right? So, as well as menopause. So 70, and I had to find the stats to make sure I get this right, but 70 to 75% of female hormones are produced by the adrenals and the rest are produced by the ovaries, right? So maybe your ovaries could kind of make up the slack when you're premenopausal, but when you kind of get into that perimenopause state, this could really, your adrenal issues can really kind of manifest and they can kind of show up, right? So we are going to be seeing that big connection when women go through that transition, is that they start being affected by a lot of the hormonal issues and adrenal issues at the same time.
Yeah. One of the, it's also so fascinating to see that, some women can go into menopause and function really well, meaning they don't feel like they need any hormones. They don't need any bioidentical estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, nothing. They just, and their cognitive function is good. They're getting full on sleep. Their brain is, nice and sharp. And they just feel like they're just going into a new phase of life, transitioning over. And there's other women, right, who have nothing like that. I mean, they're just literally going through a shit show, a storm that is just unbearable, right? And that's why we have all these culturally jokes about menopause. We have shows about menopause, right? It's like a joke in a society, like when a woman goes through menopause, but it doesn't have to be that way. One of the things that when I was in private practice, I realized was that the women who can go into menopause without much support, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to do, you guys, bioidentical progesterone and estrogen. It's not. Like, if you need it, you should work with a provider to get it. But it's the adrenals, when the adrenals are functioning really well, and those are women who are balanced, who do meditation, they do yoga, they take care of themselves, they are on a highly anti-inflammatory diet, they have healthy relationship with their husbands and people around them, right? And you can tell that they're in a good place. Those are the ones who do not need much support, because the adrenals are able to compensate and step in, like, to take over the ovaries jobs, right? Since the ovaries are just like, nothing is happening there anymore. So, and the adrenals can really step up. And so, a really good reason. So one of the takeaways we would like to leave you with today is that if you're going through perimenopause, menopause, and perimenopause, I will say it's even more peculiar. It's even more tricky and difficult, because you think like something is really wrong with you, right? And just be mindful of that. The 40, 45, for some women is 50 phase. It's like where everything's just, your body just feels like it's betraying you, right? It's like all these weird symptoms start showing up. Why am I suddenly only having like a period 3 days, and then boom, 12 days later shows up again, and my period is all over the place. I'm having mood swings, and I want to bite my dog's head off, and I want to divorce my husband, and tomorrow I love him again. And it's like, and it's kind of crazy. So one of the things I would love to leave you guys with today is really supporting your adrenal health. And that's going to help you sail through menopause rather than be going through a tremendous stress, a storm, right? So yes. Couple of other things that's been coming up here. Let me take a look at some of the, Diana has another good question. Let me just take a quick look at what she was saying there. And then you also have some recipes, right? Let me look for the comment, and then and you have some recipes in your book as well. So that's awesome. So Diana is saying, so if you have menopause, mold, long COVID, and obviously adrenal stress, how do you know where to start?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, and I saw another person commented with like, sometimes toxins can cause fertility issues. It's not just stress. And I just want to say, for what Magdalena and I are talking about stress, we consider toxins stress, right? So I consider long COVID, that's a stressor in your body. That mold exposure is a stressor in your body. Well, typically, if you have mold exposure, that's going to shift you into survival mode, and your adrenals are going to be crashed. So one of the things that you are going to want to do is support your adrenals through that process. One of the things that I focus on, and this is a unique protocol compared to like some of the old school adrenal focused texts, is I really focus on the health of the mitochondria. So our mitochondria are very sensitive to stress. They're very sensitive to mold as well. And so a lot of the issues that occur and co-occur with adrenal issues are going to be mitochondrial issues. And just supporting your mitochondria, where I talk about in my book through like utilizing carnitine and rhodiola, utilizing some of that connection with the circadian rhythm, that's going to help you so much to recover from the mold. And then the other thing to consider is the mold can also be a factor in long COVID. So studying at all of the various people and kind of connecting with the like-minded practitioners. And I've been going to a lot of the webinars and kind of forums that are a little bit, behind firewalls, so we can talk about these things, is that most people with long COVID have some sort of level of mold exposure and some mitochondrial dysfunction. So you will want to work on the mold piece as well. Yeah. And that will help you overcome the long COVID. And as far as menopause, I mean, I think all of these things collectively will help you have an easier menopause, and everything that Magdalena teaches is critical. And it's hard to know where to start, but definitely giving yourself a little bit more energy, a little bit less brain fog is going to be helpful on your healing journey. So you can, you can have the motivation and the energy to heal.
We have another good question. Jennifer is asking, is green tea okay, or should I avoid all caffeine?
This is such a great question. And okay, so you guys, when I first started my protocols, I would tell everybody you need to get off of caffeine, like 100% get off of the caffeine to heal your adrenals, right? And this worked really well for some people. It worked well for me. And then I had this one lovely client who was drinking like 6 cups of espresso a day. And she was like, I have headaches. I can't sleep at night. I'm urinating frequently. I'm really tired throughout the day. I was like, I think I know why. Let's quit the coffee, right? Yeah. And she was like, okay, I quit the coffee. My headaches are a little bit better, but I'm still having trouble with sleeping at night. I'm still fatigued. And you take all the joy out of my life, right? Because now I can't even have any caffeine and I have no energy. And so my plan does not actually restrict caffeine. Caffeine, what I've come to realize is that caffeine dependence, if you're the person crawling to your coffee machine every morning, there's probably a reason for that. And it's probably because your adrenals are dysfunctioning, you're not making morning cortisol, and because your mitochondria are not working well. So I focus on re-energizing people first. And then they don't need as much coffee and they don't need as much caffeine, but they can still, you don't need to like quit it completely to heal your adrenals, right?
Yeah.
We don't want you drinking 6 cups of coffee a day, but you don't start with going cold turkey throughout the program. Usually I have people on the program for a few weeks. Hi there. And somebody wanted to say hi. And then after 3 weeks, we have an optional caffeine wean where, you can get off of caffeine completely. I'll give you a plan to do that if that's your wish. Or if you do want to keep some caffeine throughout your daily routine, you enjoy it, but you're not like addicted to it. You're just enjoying that part of your routine. Then yes, you can absolutely, continue having some caffeine as you work on re-energizing yourself and realigning with the circadian.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's like the same thing when you are sleep deprived, right? You're gonna crave a lot more caffeine and carbohydrates and sugar as compared to get good sleep, and the cravings actually get reduced quite naturally without you feeling like you have to deprive yourself. And one little tidbit I want to leave everyone with today as well is like, especially if you really insist on drinking your coffee first thing in the morning, is that having it after a meal. Having it first thing on the empty stomach, and the whole, it's unfortunate, the whole thing about doing intermittent fasting and doing coffee and even like, an empty stomach and going and working out. This is dudes. Dudes do. It was created by a dude. And so it's like, and for a lot of women, it doesn't work. I tried it just for the sake of it, right? I thought like, I'm just going to give it a shot, see what it feels like. I lasted 2 days and I felt horrible. I mean, brain fog, total fatigue, total like a resignation of like, apathy, right? It's not for a lot of women. And so you got to listen to your body. So little tidbit, if you insist on having coffee, I have my thoughts on this. I maybe, take a little bit more staunch approach when it comes to coffee, because it has a huge correlation with estrogen dominance and the impact on the liver. But if you insist on having coffee or something caffeinated, have it after a meal, especially something like a protein and fat for breakfast. For those of you who follow me for a while, I'm a big proponent of PFF kind of breakfast, protein, fat, and fiber. Savory kind of breakfast, no sugar, right? And it's going to help you just feel completely different. Have your caffeinated drink after. It's just a super simple fix. You still get the caffeine kick that you're looking for. It's not going to give you a headache. And so that might be your solution. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And Magdalena, when I tried to do, like, I didn't do the coffee thing on purpose, but when I've never really drank coffee until I was like a new mom and I was sleep deprived, and my son was about 8 months old. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to start drinking coffee. And things were going okay until like the pandemic hit and my mom wasn't there to help me out. And like just so much stress. And I just was like, I just don't even have time to make myself breakfast because I have to take care of my young son. And I started like skipping my morning walks with my dog. And my dog was then with my parents. And I stopped having breakfast and I just would drink coffee. And I had like a major situation with my health where I got into, like I gained like 15, 20 pounds. I became like estrogen dominant. And I want to thank you for kind of letting me know about that connection and that awareness between quitting coffee and helping my hormones so much, because it's been a tremendously game-changing thing. But I know when you first mentioned it to me, I was like, there's no way I can quit coffee right now. And so I had to build up my adrenals first and get to a place where I was, you know, getting really good sleep every night, and get to a place when I was, you know, feeling really, really good with my adrenals. And then I was able to wean off the coffee much easier. And so now I will drink it, you know, maybe once a month or every few months or something. If somebody, I went to Dave Asprey's house and he offered me a coffee, I was like, okay, I'll take one from you, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it if I'm, you know,
if you're in my house, we're drinking something else. Like you can do matcha. And that's another interesting thing is, right? Like, you know, when we come and visit each other, I was just like, oh, I've got this matcha thing I'm going to make you. And you're like, I can't do matcha. It makes me anxious, right? It's like, so getting to know your body is just so important. You know, everybody just goes on about how amazing is matcha. And that's great. Like, it's great for me. Clearly, Isabella just can't, Dr. Wentz can't do it. It makes her anxious. But you know what? There's so many other caffeinated options. There is black tea, there is white tea, there is green tea, there is, you can do what else other than coffee?
Water. You introduced me to mud water, which I love.
Yeah, mud water. So that's black tea that's just powdered up. And for those of you guys who like, you know, want to try it out, mud water is actually, it's chai, but it also has, apart from black tea, that's all ground up. So it's kind of muddy when you mix it, but it also has got like turmeric and lion's mane and reishi mushrooms and cortisol. And so those are just like things that just also, you know, they combine it with adaptogens. Somebody was asking here about mushroom coffee. That's a good alternative. Again, like, you know, you got to, you know, one of the things that I think we're creating here as a platform is to really help you navigate, you know, like what agrees with me, what doesn't agree with me, right? You know, like Dr. Isabella talks about like, you know, this herb, that herb. And then some people will be like, I can't do ashwagandha, right? And you're like, it's a learn. You've got to learn how to, you know, which herbs agree with you, which foods agree with you and which don't. And it's going to be a lot easier to navigate. No one has the definitive supplement regimen or definitive diet plan for you, because the truth of the matter is that we're all different. And you probably can do things that I would not feel very good on. But there's certain things we can agree on, right? Like have really nice savory breakfast. Look at the amount of sugar you are consuming, right? Get outside, give your dog or your child or your husband a really good hug and get a massage. I mean, those are things that are really not going to hurt you. They only can help. Okay. So in case you're joining in a little bit late, Dr. Isabella Wentz has got a new book called The Adrenal Transformation Protocol. And it's available on Amazon now. I dropped the link a couple of times, you guys, for you to check it out. It's not on a pre-order anymore, right? Like it's actually shipping now, correct?
If you order it right now, it'll be shipping in 2 weeks or so.
Oh, in 2 weeks. Okay. All right. Easy peasy. You're gonna, oh. Now I have 3 dogs, not just 2. And the funny thing is I'm actually hosting a dog of a friend of ours who actually we met through. No, sorry, I met her through you. No, sorry, that's okay. So Debbie. So Debbie's dog is here with me today. Come, Goji, come. We're gonna show off that little monster. Oh, he's just the sweetest guy. Come on, he's such a sweetest guy. So let's just show a dog. Telling you, man, if anyone here is feeling lonely and you need some oxytocin, get a dog.
I agree. One of the things I used to do is back in my past, I would go to like a pet store or a shelter. And I would just go there and you can volunteer to like.
Oh, that's a great idea.
When I lived with my parents, it took a lot of convincing to get them to allow me to get a dog. And then they stole 2 dogs from me. Like it just was like, I would get a dog and then I moved out and they were like, this is my dog now. And then I had to get another dog and then they stole that one. So,
yeah. The cutest. Isn't he the cutest, you guys? He's hypoallergenic too. So he's half poodle, half Cocker Spaniel. Okay, we're going to go for a walk, you guys, huh? So good to see you. I hope this is helpful, you guys. All the information here today. I know we can go on literally for 3 hours.
I know we could. It's always so much fun. And I feel like I always learn so much from you. And it's always fun to connect on all of the different cool things that we're trying and that we're doing.
Yeah.
Share some ideas. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. And and the thing also that I think is really important for any practitioner is just be a constant teacher, a student, right? And it's like the same way. And there's a saying in Chinese, learn or die. And it's a little drastic and dramatic, maybe, right? But the message is, like, we need to be constant students, right, of our own health. Unfortunately, we all know that the current allopathic practice in medicine is not there to help us heal. It's great if you have an accident, you have double hip replacement like myself. That's absolutely needed and fantastic, but not for chronic stuff like so many of you are experiencing. So you are a student for life, Isabella, and you're constantly evolving and researching. And can I also say here, because you're going to get a lot of emails because of that, I've been talking about oxalates for a long time.
Yes.
Well, ever since I had that problem. And I just want to acknowledge, like, you did the OAT test for me, organic acid test, and adjusted my supplements based on the results. And I can eat anything that is high in oxalates now and be pain-free. And it's just not just pain-free, but I feel like my inflammation is down. My brain is like on again. And I mean, the pain was a huge thing because pain exhausts you, right? You are in pain, you're constantly exhausted. And so my sleep is amazing. So I just want to publicly recognize that and say thank you, because this has been life-changing. And that's because you're just you're such a student for life and such a nerd and such a researcher. You just can't stop. At the same time, your Instagram account is like so fun to watch. So you have like this nice dichotomy of being a scientist, but also being a supermodel on your Instagram account and a real ninja and having a lot of fun with it. So we love you. Thank you for being here and helping us out navigate through adrenal health. You guys, really important book. It goes a lot deeper into adrenals compared to what I cover, because that's just, my whole shtick is estrogen dominance. And so you really want to learn how to help yourself in a meaningful way and help you navigate and how to design your own protocol. Then that's a really great book for you to consider. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Isabella, for making the time for us. Get the book. You should be shipping in a couple of weeks. And I truly believe that it's going to be a big, important tool in your toolbox to help yourself feel better. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Guys, thank you, Magdalena. I love you.